talk for the day. Welcome, Michelle. Thank you so much for coming through. I do appreciate it. It's been an hour later. So thank you so much for joining. Michelle is her topic today is about how stories heal. And that's absolutely what Open Mic's about, because I think people forget about the stories that happens in our lives. And definitely, stories are something that's very close to my heart. So Michelle, thank you so much. I would like you to please introduce yourself. Tell people, what you do, where you're from, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, and hi everyone, and thanks Sheshni for having me on here. It's really a privilege and an honor to be chatting to you today. So I'm a trauma recovery and authentic self-empowerment coach. So basically that means I work with women mainly, but I do work with men occasionally. Mm-hmm. And I help people to overcome their trauma blocks, because when we experience a traumatic event, it has a profound impact on our lives often, and often mm-hmm. It's hard to work through that. And other people who are just dissatisfied with their life and want something more, something better. So I help them work through whatever's blocking their way to that future that they want. I'm from Fourways, Johannesburg. Born and raised, lived here all my life. Okay. And yeah, storyteller at heart, I guess. I've always valued the power of storytelling. As a teenager, my diary was my most prized possession. Uh-huh. And in fact, I worked in public relations and as a journalist for quite a number of years before I moved over to coaching full time. So mm-hmm. I've kind of brought that whole passion for storytelling into my coaching practice, and it forms the foundation of my coaching approach.
Okay, so fabulous. So you're currently coaching, and obviously you specialize in trauma. So I'm going to give you the platform. You will see me, looking down. I'm looking down because I'm monitoring the comments, and we have people live with us, and they share questions. So guys, please, share questions for Michelle, some comments to her. If you guys want to know anything particularly about her coaching practice, about if you need tips, if you need some help with certain aspects, please, share it with Michelle. And yeah, we have Megan on. Hi, Megan. Megan says Michelle is amazing. Oh, wow. Okay, we have a fan on. We have a fan on. Welcome, Megan. It's good to have you on. So Michelle, I'm going to hand it over to you.
So thank you. I also just want to say, if I look to the side, I've got a few notes to just try and keep me on track, because
don't worry,
storytelling is a subject that I'm passionate about. So I'm likely to go off on a tangent. So anyway.
Okay.
So storytelling really forms the very core of our lives. I think it's the essence of our being, because our whole lives are basically stories, right? Mm-hmm. They're stories of events and experiences that we've had or that others have had. I mean, that's what mm-hmm. we talk about, right? And our interactions with other people, so whether they're good or bad. And because they're so central to our being, they form like a critical part of healing. And in fact, in terms of trauma, I would say that storytelling is the most crucial step to take in the healing journey. And so, I mean, look, a lot of people don't want to tell their stories because they can be hard to tell, especially yes. Trauma stories can be exceptionally hard to tell for a number of reasons. But the thing is that a lot of people are definitely worried about the reaction of others. I think what others will think of them or think of their stories, because we're all worried about being accepted, right? And what others think of us. But the thing is that storytelling in a trauma context specifically, which is mainly what my focus is on today, it's really about you, and it's about unburdening yourself, and it's about your healing. And so it shouldn't, when you tell your story, it shouldn't be with the expectation of how others are going to respond, because they may not respond in the way we want them to. So it's really, it should come from more of an approach of, I need to get this out there, without any expectation of what you're going to get back, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And look, keeping your story to yourself can be so detrimental and counterproductive to the healing process. And something that I've noticed in my coaching practice is I send out a questionnaire to people before we do a session, just so that we can get the most out of a session, and I know how to sort of structure things or questions to mm-hmm. ask, that kind of thing. And having a safe, confidential non-judgmental space to share their story is one of the top things that my clients value. So it's quite interesting. So people need that space, you know, so they want to tell their stories, but they need to feel that they're going to be accepted and not judged. But so I've chosen to speak about this today because I think people who've been through a traumatic event, or even people who've, you know, had a challenge or a upset or whatever, anxiety, whatever in their lives, they are told to talk about it, right? But I don't think a lot of people understand why they should talk about it. They all know they've got to talk about it. They don't know why.
That's very true. Very, very true, right? I think when people experience trauma, they keep it to ourselves. And you actually touched on something very, very interesting, and I'm going to share it with you now, right? People are so aware, or they'd rather not share something because of what society dictates how it should reflect to people. And they don't want to be judged by society. That's what it is. That stigma, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That stigma for me is something that, and we spoke, I mean, I met you this week, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I said to you that I can relate a lot to what you're doing because I've been through my own trauma as well. And the trauma that, you know, we have and we experience, and I don't know, the clients that, you know, you see, are they comfortable to share this?
With me, yeah, I think
Okay.
I mean, look, they do struggle. I don't think that it comes easily. But I think it's about having that, as I said, safe, and I mean, it's a kind of talk that we have before a coaching session starts, that there's a safe, confidential, non-judgmental space. So this is your space. You must get it all out, you know. So, I mean, look, sometimes it does take some questioning and picking, and, you know, that's what us coaches do, is try and get to the nitty-gritty and the bottom of it. But yeah, on the whole, I find people, I mean, that's why they come to me, right, is to work with their trauma. So I think there is an expectation that they're going to have to share their story.
Okay. All right.
So storytelling, is the importance of it in our lives is underpinned by anecdotal and researched evidence, which is quite interesting. But so on the anecdotal side, if you have a look, there's a million quotes about how sharing our stories takes guts and courage, which it absolutely does. But about how sharing it can be healing for both yourself and others. And one of my favorite quotes is from Alex L., who says, and I'm going to read it if you excuse me, because I didn't memorize it. I thought this was so powerful and impactful, and actually just kind of perfectly encapsulates what we've just said. You are not a victim for sharing your story. You are a survivor setting the world on fire with your truth. And you never know who needs your light, your warmth, and your raging courage. I mean, I've got goosebumps.
Yeah, no, that's intense. That's intense. Yeah.
And it can. I mean, there's all those quotes about how your story can serve as a survival guide to others. And I think people like to know that they're not alone, you know, even though experiences obviously differ. People often find commonality in their experiences, you know, and the way they've responded to them on an emotional level. So today I'm just going to give quite a brief overview of the three main ways that telling your story can help you heal. And they're all kind of interconnected. And so I'm going to be talking about body, mind, and soul. So I'm giving a very brief overview. There's so much more to each category, but it just kind of gives an idea. So we made up of those three elements, basically, right? We're not just the body, we're not just the mind, and we're not just the soul. We're all three. So in order for our healing to begin, we need to tell our stories, and it needs to be an alignment of all three elements, if that makes sense. So on the body, physical kind of side, we experience trauma, or all events actually, at a cellular level. And so again, particularly relating to trauma, because we experience it that way, the experience continues to live inside our body and our cells, if I can put it like that. And so when our emotions are constantly negative and attached to this traumatic experience that we've had, it can block the healthy flow of energy, and there is a thought that can leave a space for disease to grow. which is quite interesting. So once you have let go of your negative emotions and kind of can release them from the cellular memory, it'll help you not have so much like physical and psychological stress. It's really quite interesting and technical, so I don't want to go too much into that.
Mm-hmm.
But I can give you quite an example. So releasing your story through releasing your trauma through telling your story can help release a positive flow of energy through your cells. So picture it like this. It's probably the most simplistic way that I can explain it.
Okay.
You know, when you've told your story, okay, so even if it's not a big trauma, right? Even if it's something that's just really made you angry or upset.
Yeah.
Once you've told somebody about it, you feel almost physically lighter.
Yeah.
Or and there's that saying, right? You feel like a weight was lifted off your shoulders.
Yeah. That's very true. Very true. Yeah.
Physical response. Okay.
Yeah.
So and we start feeling a bit better in our bodies too once we've told our story. There's another kind of hormonal reason for that, if you want to put it that way. So when we in a state of stress or anxiety or whatever, which trauma and other difficult life experiences gives us, our sort of stress hormones are in full flare, right? So we've got our lovely yucky emotions like cortisol and adrenaline and all those things that are really like don't make us feel great either. When we tell our story, the just that action of communicating our story, it switches off our stress response, right? So it affects our nervous system. And instead of those yucky hormones, our system starts putting out some good hormones like oxytocin and dopamine and endorphins. And those obviously are our feel-good hormones. So just by communicating, we're switching off our stress response neurologically, and we're boosting our good hormones. So it's really powerful that there's concrete evidence that telling our story can affect our body so much. So then if we get to the mind, again, so when we have a traumatic experience, it gets stored in the mind, right, as a memory. And that's obviously associated with all the negative feelings like anger, fear, stress, worry, whatever, vulnerability, whatever uncomfortable, horrible feelings we don't like. And these emotional memories have a profound impact on our brain. And the way we think influences the way we act, right? So if we leave all the stress and tension, you know, in our brains, then our behavior is going to reflect in our behavior. So you can look at it like a pressure cooker. It kind of just builds and builds and builds. You can see, so people are super stressed at work, right? They're going to be more likely to trigger a road rage accident when they're stuck in traffic because they're not working, right? So it's the same kind of effect. So that's why it's vital to help your brain understand and integrate and release your trauma to help get rid of that effect. And the way in which this works is that our left logical brain, and when we tell stories, our left logical brain and our right emotional brain work together. So there's that kind of crossover in that middle area, and that helps us to integrate the experience and deal with it more holistically. So one of my favorite psychiatrists, Dr. Daniel Siegel, I quote him often. I love his stuff. So he basically, his whole thing about stress and communication and telling the story is that when the left hemisphere of the brain tells the right hemisphere of the brain what's going on, your whole system calms down. So that goes back to that physical response that I spoke about earlier. And that's how we make sense of what's happened to us. Look, it's a super simplistic explanation, but it helps to understand how our mind works in terms of storytelling and healing.
It makes a lot of sense. You know, the simplest of examples is what, if somebody can relate to, it makes them very wary of examples of what we experience, what we feel, what is our mind, our state of mind versus the way that our body feels, because the state of mind influences what we feel and how our body would feel and how we project as well to other people, right? So
absolutely.
Okay.
So the left and right brain integration is facilitated by the storytelling process because, as I said it before, it engages both sides of the brain. So the left brain guides our logic, our language, our memory, among other things, and those are engaged during storytelling, right? Because we've got to put the story in a certain order. We've got to think it through rationally. We've got to use our language to communicate it. And then it engages the right side of our brain, which is visualization abilities and, of course, our emotions. Because when you're recounting a story, it will bring up those emotions, And so because they're both engaged in the storytelling process, then you're getting a nice integrated approach to your healing. And so, I mean, it also is important because the both elements bring together kind of the sensation, which is important. So your body sensations, because often people feel emotions in their body, like a tight chest, butterflies in the tummy, whatever it may be. Your thoughts, okay, which are like, oh, I'm scared of that, or whatever, or that makes me feel anxious, or I don't know if people think about it that clearly, but our thoughts may just also be negative. I don't want to go outside anymore, whatever it is. And then our feelings. And so once those three elements are together, it really helps us with our self-regulation. So yeah, it also helps us gain perspective. People, once they've spoken about their story, they realize different things about it, new things about it, new things about others, even from the feedback they get, but even just been telling it. I know a client recently told me he wrote down a page about something that was bothering him. So he just sort of put it all on paper. And afterwards he said he read it again and he was like, what? It's not that big of a thing. Why was I so worried about it? So it minimized it completely once it got it out, but if it had been left to kind of simmer in the brain, it probably would have grown and grown and grown. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think we manifest a lot of stuff in our brains. We manifest a lot of things that isn't true. And we tend to focus on the negative versus the positive. We also don't tend to look at things in a different perspective. I have this thing, and I say this to a lot of people as well. Even when we tell our stories, okay? When we tell our stories, no matter the different ways we tell our stories, it's through the lenses that you view it. Okay?
Absolutely.
So the story that you tell is always the lens that you perceive it to be, right? If someone else was in the same boat or in the same place where that story happened, you would not see it the same way. Because how we see the world and how we perceive things to be has an influence at the stories that we share and that we tell, right? Which is very, very significant. And open mic for me, when I created this platform for open mic and for people, I think you can relate to this, and you touched on it. It's an outlet. It's an outlet for you to heal, to hear yourself. What are you saying? And the process as to how it helps you to heal. So you've touched on a lot of things, but I'm very, very, how can I say? I believe that there's many different ways of telling a story. If you have 10 people in the room and you ask all 10 people, what did you see? You will definitely get 10 different versions of that story. And something that's very important that people need to know and hear is that the story that you tell is the story, it's your version. It's the way you have your lens over that perspective that has happened to you, which is very different.
Yeah. No, and obviously in the coaching process, we do pick apart some of the stuff and unpack it, and people, through whether it's talking about it or going to coaching or counseling or writing about it or whatever way it is, people do often get a different perspective once they've told their story. I think one of the most powerful things though about storytelling is something I touched on just now, where the more we tell it, the less triggering the memory becomes, right? So we become desensitized in a way to our own story, especially if it's a deeply personal, traumatic kind of story. And so then it kind of loses its power, right? And we get to a place, hopefully eventually, where it no longer controls us or has such a hold over us. And that is so powerful. That is so powerful.
It's absolutely, you hit the nail on the spot there, I must say, right? And most people don't get that. The more you release those stories, the more you verbalize, the more you say it, it doesn't have that power over you anymore. And you're the first coach, you're the first, trauma coach that I've had on the show. And I'm not too sure what some of the listeners on. It's absolutely profound what you're saying, because we learn from the things that we say. And I don't know if you've noticed this with the clients that you have. Every time they share the story, there could be something different in the story.
There is always. And also, or a different aspect of it has more of their attention, because we work through it like that, right? In bits and pieces. So one week it may be this, and then the next week the story might be sort of the same, but there'll be more emphasis on another element of it.
Okay.
And so then the last kind of aspect is our soul. So I equate our soul to our emotions, because I believe we are primarily emotional beings, right? And telling our story is a deeply personal narrative that can literally take us back into the moment, right? And I think that's why it's often so hard to talk about, especially trauma stories, because we don't want to go back there, you know, but we have to heal, unfortunately. But that's why telling stories is hard. We don't want to go back there. But because it does that, because you go back there, you can connect and recognize the emotions and the sensations that you had, right? And this connection and recognition helps us to know what we need to work on, because by labeling our emotions, so if we're looking at our story and we're saying, okay, I felt fear there, or absolute terror there, or anger here, or whatever it is, once we've labeled our emotions, they're so much easier to work through. And it takes away their power once they're a known entity, because otherwise they're just a feeling that we have inside of us. And again, quoting Dr. Daniel Siegel, he says we should name it to tame it, right? And he believes, I love that saying because it's so easy to remember. But his sort of theory is that by labeling our emotions, they can inform us instead of overwhelming us. I believe that our emotions are our messengers, right? They are telling us things. So the good ones say, yes, I like that, keep doing that, it felt good, whatever, repeat that experience. And the bad ones are going, whoa, buddy, stop. Something's got to be fixed or changed, or something's happening here. We've got to sort this out. Yeah. And people, you know, ignore their negative emotions, because who wants to feel that, right? We sort of wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, right? So the negative emotions often get swept under the carpets and not dealt with. But unfortunately, healing cannot happen without the feeling. And so we've got to go there, and you've got to sit with those emotions, whatever they are, and accept them and then release them, you know. So those are some of the basic ways that storytelling can help us heal. I've got a few more points that I just want to touch on.
Okay.
So the one thing is, I'd like to highlight that obviously not everyone wants to share their story publicly, and that's absolutely okay. You don't have to, you know, I mean, in this day and age of social media, a lot of people post stuff on their social media channels or do videos about it, and that's awesome if that's what you want to do. But people shouldn't feel that that's what they have to do in order to tell their story and for it to be healing. So you really need to be guided by what feels right and authentic to you, and whether or not you share your story with others at all, you know, up to you. But you know, so you can choose to tell your close friends and family, you can choose to tell your coach or doctor or wherever is in a confidential space if that's what you feel you need. You can tell it to your dog, your fish, your cat, the favorite tree, speak it to the clouds, it doesn't matter. But if you speak it, so even if no one can hear you, right? And who's going to judge you? Your dog is not going to judge you, right? but speaking about it helps. It doesn't, no one has to necessarily hear it, right? And if you don't want to speak about it, write it down. Writing has also, brings in the whole left brain, right brain element, and also helps that release. So journals are always great for, and always recommend them because I just think they're fabulous. Some people aren't, you know, the journaling type, which is also fine, but you can write it on a scrap of paper and tear it up. That's a great way of releasing it, or burning it, you know, having a ceremony of burning it. Yeah. That's a great, like, ritualistic or ceremonial kind of way that you can make statements about, I'm letting this go now. I'm literally like sending it to ash, you know, or tearing it up into tiny little pieces or whatever you want to do with it. So that's a really cathartic kind of part of the process, you know, of telling a story. And the last thing that I want to mention is that when you're telling a story, however you tell it, it is important that you have to tell it fully and unapologetically. You've really got to own it. You've got to own your story. And it's not about, as I said before, what other people think,
Mm-hmm.
about you or the story once you've told it. It's really about your story and you telling it through your lens, sure. And it doesn't mean it's perfect or right or whatever it's supposed to be. It doesn't have to be any of that. It's valid and it's authentic. It's yours,
Yeah.
so own it. And that's how we get the best out of storytelling in terms of healing. And I mean, I think people who've suffered a trauma tend to feel out of control and very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And storytelling is the first big step they can take to start taking that control back in their lives.
Okay. Fabulous. Thank you so much. Guys, is there any questions for Michelle? If you have any comments for Michelle, please send it through. I think, Michelle, if somebody has to get a hold of you and is seeking your help, how do they get a hold of you?
So they can contact me on Facebook or through my website, or they're welcome to pop me a WhatsApp message. So yeah, they can, schedule we can have a chat and see if they think we'd work well together and take it from there.
Okay, so I think you'll see Michelle on the face group, Open Mic for Women on the face group where your interview was live right now. What you can do is put your details in there and give the people your details if they want to reach out to you. But I will also be hosting Michelle's details on the Open Mic Foundation's website. So for all the speakers that have been on Open Mic for the last 2 months that we've been doing this, I am going to be hosting a page on the website, and the website's details is www.openmicfoundation.org, and all the speakers' details and informations. And if you want to get in contact with them, you can. If you can't get a hold of Michelle or anyone else that you're looking for, you are welcome to contact me directly on the social media pages, and happy to pass on the details that you're looking for as well. I think, Michelle, you're doing an absolutely stunning job and phenomenal way of helping people. We do underestimate the trauma that we experience. It doesn't matter how big the trauma is. I think the smallest of little things that we go through in life in general, I think we take for granted how it impacts us as individuals. But however I see that they don't realize what it actually does to someone.
I think, yeah, people, I think, have a disconnect between the way they think and their behavior, and so often people think, well, why do I keep acting like that? Why, or whatever it is, because like I just can't figure it out. And it's like, it's all in the mind, really. And I don't mean that in a patronizing way, but it is. It's something to do with your thoughts and your feelings about why something's triggering you, and you've got to get to the bottom of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, to Amina that was on earlier as well, and she talked about the alignment of oneself, the alignment of oneself, being yourself in your business. If you're not centered in, you're not going to be able to move forward in whatever it is. And to your point, it could be also the trauma that you've experienced that's also blocking you and not allowing you to move forward. But I certainly think we underestimate how we experience things and how we internally, go through these emotions in ourselves, because we may think it's small, but not realizing how much it actually affects. I mean, we have a lot of people in the world that are very hypersensitive in the sense of we have, empathy people, we have, a lot of people that are very sensitive to what they see, to what they hear. I have a daughter, and she's only 10, but she is super, super sensitive to what she hears. And what she hears is she hears a lot of things and different, and she tries to contextualize it. It's not hers, but it's something she's heard, right?
Yeah.
So we tend to also absorb other people's trauma.
Look, as South Africans, I can tell you that we're all probably traumatized on some level, because we read about it and see it so much on the news. No, really, but it's like, it's become kind of, we've become desensitized to it in a way, but we're also kind of deeply traumatized by it, because I think we all kind of, this is happening to people around us, and it's scary, and it makes us feel vulnerable and scared, and there's so many people who may not have been affected by a criminal event that are scared to drive at night, or are scared to walk outside and sit on their patio, or whatever the case is, because of stories they've heard, you know, if it hasn't happened to you, it definitely happened to one of your friends or family, and you read about it on the news so much, you know. So it's there and it's present every day in our lives.
I have someone that's in my team, and she takes what has happened, like to your point, what you just mentioned right now. She takes what has happened to someone else, and she believes that it'll happen to her. So she lives on the edge. No, I'm serious. She lives on the edge of what something could have happened with her. And I'm like, could have, should have, would have, but has not.
Yeah.
Right. So that trauma of seeing and hearing someone else's, you know, trauma is quite interesting, because, you know, once we think it's happening to us, in the meantime, you know what, it actually happens to someone else.
Yeah. Well, it's a thing. Yeah. It's called secondary traumatization, and that's, you know, it's or indirect, sorry, not secondary, indirect traumatization, and that's definitely from getting all the inputs and the messages and the information of this stuff that's happening all the time, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle, I want to say thank you so much for your insights. Thank you so much for coming on into Open Mic. I truly appreciate your expertise. I want you to reach out. There's going to be, I mean, put your details on there for the people, you know, to reach out to you. And thank you so much for coming on. It's been truly an honor having you on and sharing some of your insights and your expertise. And I wish you the best. And I'm sure we're going to be in contact soon.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It's been lovely speaking to you this afternoon.
It's a pleasure. You take care of yourself, and thank you so much again.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers, Michelle.
Bye.